My sheep, Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice. My sheep hear my voice. Isn't it so wonderful to be known as the sheep of Jesus, that Jesus looks at us and he says, those are my sheep. You know, we love to belong to Jesus. We love to feel like we're the lamb in Jesus' arms. We've got a stained glass window that behind me here up in the up above of Jesus holding one of those lambs, and I think it's just such a great image. We love to think of ourselves that way, that we are secure in the arms of Jesus. And as he says, no one can take them out of my hand. We love being the sheep of Jesus. But on the other hand, sometimes we don't love being the sheep of Jesus, because being a sheep means that we've got to follow somebody else, right? It means that we've got to follow the shepherd, and sometimes that shepherd is going right by this really nice green grazing pasture, and we think, wait a second, we want to stop here. We want to feed a little bit on this pasture, and the shepherd keeps on going, and we maybe get some of our own ideas, just like some of those farm animals get their own ideas, and they want to go in their own direction. And then we wish that we could kind of break free a little bit, right? We think that maybe we know a little bit better what's going to help us, and we go in our own direction. And as sheep, sometimes that gets us in a lot of trouble. Sometimes that puts us in a dangerous situation. And the shepherd has to come back after us and bring us back to himself. But we know that Jesus is the good shepherd, and so Jesus has that way of calling us back to himself. No matter how far we have strayed, he's able to call us, and if we hear his voice, if we know his voice, then we come back to him and we can find him again. And one of the instruments that Jesus has to do this as a shepherd, he's got that shepherd's crook. You recognize the image of the crook. Sometimes a bishop has a crozier, right? The bishop's crozier is kind of like that shepherd's crook. And that crook that Jesus has to call the sheep back to the right path, that crook, we could say, is the church. The church's teaching office, right? Or the church's magisterium. That sometimes the church needs to kind of rein us in a little bit and say, okay, actually what we believe and how we're going to follow the shepherd is this way. And the church can do that because the church is given that authority by Jesus. Jesus, the good shepherd, gives his church that authority to teach. And every once in a while, we feel a little bit of a tug on our neck. You know, it feels a little bit uncomfortable. We're not really, excited about what is being said to us. But I think that's just the pull of that crook on our neck trying to bring us back to the path of Christ. And Jesus, as the good shepherd, he's not content to just sort of shepherd us from heaven, right? He's not on some kind of computer in heaven saying, okay, go over here, go over here, go over here. Jesus is not a remote worker in that sense. Jesus has a person on earth, right? Jesus wants to shepherd us here on earth. And that person that has been given to the church throughout the world to shepherd us is the Pope, the Holy Father. And of course, this past Thursday, we have a new Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV. And so Pope Leo XIV, just like St. Peter at the very beginning, St. Peter was given those keys of the kingdom to bind and to loose, to govern the church. Jesus said to St. Peter, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. That was what Jesus said to St. Peter, and that authority that Jesus gave to Peter has been passed on again and again and again, 266 times to now Pope Leo XIV, and he's been given that authority to govern us and to lead us in the way of Jesus. And I think that's so important to realize because, there's always the possibility that sometimes a pope might lead us in a direction that we're not sure about, or we don't understand, or we don't really feel comfortable with, or whatever it is. But this pope has been given the authority by Jesus to govern the church. And so if he's the shepherd that Jesus has given to us, that means that we as the sheep of Christ, we owe our Holy Father our love, we owe him our respect. We have to follow him. We've got to follow him because he's going to lead us in the way of Jesus to those pastures of eternity. And so today as sheep we can rejoice that we are the sheep of Christ, that we are safe within his arms. Let's be docile, let's be humble, let's listen to the voice of Christ as he speaks to us in the church, as he speaks to us in the scriptures, as he speaks to us in prayer. Let's follow that good shepherd all the way to those pastures of eternity in the kingdom of heaven.